This is the S.J. Childs Show, hosted by S.J. Childs, streaming on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Find us on all social medias. The S.J. Childs Show, bringing value to families through education and resources. Check us out weekly, where we'll have new and exciting guests. Thanks so much for your support. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by S.J. Childs Books for Children. Visit sjchilds.org today to check out their special needs book collection. Teach inclusion and neurodiversity in this special 7-book collection. Get yours today. Sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word the mouth for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com. By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah. This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah. Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Childs Show. I'm your host, S.J. Childs, and today I have a really fantastic guest, a fellow, not a former author, a fellow author, Sal Dixon, and he has some award-winning books, award-winning author, and we'd like to welcome him today and talk a little bit about his journey and his books and find out if there's anything exciting to come in the future. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're both here in Utah, so just neighbors in our Salt Lake Valley. And so we're both experiencing this horrible heat and storms rolling in every once in a while. But yeah, it's a pretty nice summer otherwise. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started.
Okay, well, I tell the kids this all the time when I'm in front of usually first graders at schools and stuff. I usually tell them kind of what got me started in writing, and what it really was. I had a poet come and visit my middle school when I was in the 7th grade, and at this time, Shel Silverstein was really popular.
Love him.
Amongst all us kids
Yes.
going to school and stuff, right? And everybody was reading it, and this poet came in. Where he stood out is I went to middle school in Hawaii.
Okay.
And so my dad was stationed over there, and we lived at Schofield Barracks, which is kind of up towards the north side. And so I was at Wahiawa Intermediate. And while I was there, one of the things that jumped out to me is this poet that came in, and he was part Hawaiian and part Asian. But he had hair that went down to the back of his knees.
Oh, wow.
Now, you're talking about a kid who grew up on a military base half the time, moving around. And I'm used to a lot of short haircuts, as you can see.
Yeah, right.
As short as you can get, right? But, this guy just had this long hair. We just made him jump out. But he came in, and he had us start writing poetry. And I remember one of the first poems that he had us, subjects he had us write about was about Africa, because this is the time of We Are the World and all the outreach to Africa and things. And so we were all writing poems. And as we started writing our poetry and he was giving us the different assignments, I discovered that I had a gift for writing, just like Shel Silverstein, that I could write poetry that sounded like his stuff. And immediately I don't know what it does. It just created like a spark inside of me. And I'd always kind of liked creative writing, but putting it into a format where there were some rules and structure to it. And it was like a puzzle. I'm putting this puzzle together. I have all these ideas and I'm going to form it into this puzzle that makes it so that it just has a rhythm to it and kind of sucks people in when they would read it. And that's where I started writing poetry. And by sophomore year, I had written things and I had teachers saying, oh, you should go get published. And I started looking into things, and I didn't really go down that road until right as I went off to college. I went off to college, and after I graduated from high school, and I was determined, okay, I'm going to go get some of my poetry published. And I started fumbling around and sending things off to different magazines and anything I could, and got a writer's market book and just started sending these poems off everywhere. And I started putting the rejection letters on my wall.
Right. And, I know how that is.
and I don't know if I was happier or my roommates were happier when I got my first magazine back with an acceptance and a check.
Yeah.
Because then I took all my rejections down.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, I think the very first poem that I had in a magazine, it was Ladies Circle magazine. And I think it was, it was a little poem that I wrote called The Sock Monster.
Oh, the moms ate it up.
They did.
Yeah.
And I think I can remember it. I think there's a monster in my dryer. This I know is true. For every time I wash my clothes, my socks go in by 2. But when I take them out, the thought uncurls my hair. I'm missing over half of them, 1 from every pair. I'm getting sick and tired of losing what is mine. From now on, when I wash my socks, I'll hang them on the line.
I love that, though.
And they put a little monster next to a dryer and threw this in there. And I remember, I think I got a check for $35 and a couple copies of the magazine. And my aunts went running down to the grocery store to buy it and so forth. And they were all excited and stuff. And that started that process. And I started getting published here and there, but it didn't take long before that penny lost its shine.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoop-de-doo, I've been published 20-something times now, but there's no money in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on to other things, and I went in the military and started raising a family. I didn't write much. And then years down the road, my kids were coming along, and I started telling them stories. And sometimes I'd make up stories for my kids. And then I went through my divorce, and I started writing a lot of poetry again. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it started to turn to full stories for my children about subjects and things that would come up in our family.
Yeah.
And I would write these, and I'd write full-blown children's stories. And from my experience before that I had gone through with getting published in magazines and things, I looked at it and I thought, do I want editors out there that control, like, if they're going to control my story or whether or not they accept it or not? And one of the problems I had, not a problem, but something I had noticed with my poetry was a lot of times whether a poem was accepted or rejected really wasn't whether or not it was good. It was whether or not obviously it has to be good enough they're going to publish it. But beyond that, it was whether or not it hit the subject that they were looking for.
Exactly. Who knows that?
And it's timing. And when they're looking for poems on a certain thing. And then those trends change, right? And and I'm not writing my poetry to fit a schedule.
Right.
I'm writing things that affect me at certain times in my life. Yeah. So I figured instead of worrying about if my schedule's lining up with all these random publishers, which is like a needle in the haystack, I looked at that. I also looked at the market, and I saw bookstores, and I saw, the computer, growing and internet growing. And I said, some of these stores, newspapers were in trouble, and I started seeing book sales decline and other things. And I said, why should I jump through a lot of hurdles to get into a system that is quickly changing completely? I'm better off to do something where I create my own method of selling my books, and then I have full creative control. I have the ability to do everything, and and I'm a kind of an entrepreneur and a salesman, natural salesman since I was a kid. My grandma nicknamed me Mouth. And so I figured, I can go and sell some books or something like that. And I just wanted to do it because I was passionate about it. I had already made a decision that I couldn't make a living, and not a living I wanted by being a writer. I felt like that. And then, of course, the pressures of if you're doing it for money, are you going to be writing by subject or writing things just so that you'll get it sold instead of writing what you want to, right?
Passion. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I also watched the industry, the internet industry, and I watched companies like Facebook and some of these companies that were born where they started off for free. And then they learned to monetize it as it grew, right? And they developed a product that people loved, and then over time they monetized it. And I felt like, okay, I'm going to just focus on doing it because I love it. And if I create a great product, I'll find ways to monetize it as I go. And it was kind of a hobby or a passion that I did on the side anyway. So I started doing that, and I would make stories. Now, the biggest challenge I had is I cannot draw. When I say I can't draw stick people.
Me neither. Wow, we must be like soul authors.
I go in with first graders and I tell them, if we all had a drawing contest right now, most of you in this room would beat me in your first grade. And I can paint a picture with my words, but when it comes to actually, but I love film, and sometimes, I mean, I could do things with a camera, and I know what I want to see to create that. But if I had to draw it or form it where I'm trying to be that, the artist, I can't do that. So what I wanted was the ability almost to be the director. Yeah. And I find artists that I work well with that I can kind of direct them. And the ones, some I'm able to direct a little bit more than others.
Yeah.
As that relationship clicks, I can kind of give them my vision, and then they're going to go out and add that to the paper. And then even things as I create my books, one of the things I take in mind is, because I write in rhyme and, having that rhyme and meter with poetry and stuff, I find that even as I lay out the words on a page, I have to be very conscious of how the words are laid out, because I want to do everything in my power to assist the reader in staying on rhythm.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than you're reading a book that rhymes and then you mess up and you lose the rhythm or something, or I call it crashing and burning, right?
There you go.
it destroys the rhythm of the story, that you're enjoying, right? So when you turn the page and you go to the next text, it needs to be easy to find. It needs to be easy to understand, and just lay out. And there has to be a good pacing, so you don't want to turn the page in the middle and ruin the pace. So all these things are important. I can't have the text. Yeah, we've all seen children's books where they get creative and have text like written all over the place.
Yes, I don't either.
I don't like it when I'm reading. And it's very important that, for me, they can't do that because they'll lose their place and mess up. So I try to be simple with my text, but the pictures can do what they need to do to tell the story. One thing I also learned from Shel Silverstein is sometimes you can set up a joke with your text, and the picture is the punchline.
Oh, yeah. That's
I've
cute.
done things like that in the story, where I think he has the one poem that I love from him. I think it's, I don't remember the title of it, but I know that the little boy's like, my mom said I'd lose my head if it wasn't fastened on, but one day, I blinked and it was gone. I can't look for it because my eyes are on it. I can't call to it because my mouth is on it. It wouldn't hear me anyway because my ears are on it. I'll just sit on this rock and rest a while. And he's sitting on his head.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the punchline, right? It's the ultimate driving the joke home. And I think that there's things like that if you work it out, and being that I'm the director, right, of the story, as well as the author, I kind of direct the artist so that sometimes I have that coordination to do that. And I know sometimes when you send your stuff off to a large publisher, they just hire an illustrator.
Yeah, and that's it.
And you don't have that. You don't have a say in how the picture, And I can do things like, for example, one of the rules that I have when we're doing books, if there's a lot of dialogue, we can do that on less pages. if there's action, you need more pictures, because the pictures have to be shown through the, they have to show action, right? If you just read a lot of action with one picture, it doesn't really give you the same for the book. So you want to have less text and more pictures when there's action parts, and you can have more text and less pictures when there's dialogue. And these are things that I do. And that, so kind of the pacing of the book, you might say, I look at that. And one of the things I do is when I go in to visit with the kids in my presentations, when I go to the schools, I like to, I talk about the different hats of creating a children's book and the different roles. We talk about the author and the illustrator, and most of the first graders get those right away.
Yeah.
And then we talk about who the publisher is, the business hat. And I talk about, what the publisher does. We talk about an editor and what the editor does. And we also talk about the printer. And so I usually discuss those 5 roles, and we discuss what each one does and where one stops and the other begins, kind of, and how I kind of direct all those things. And as the publisher, selling the book, marketing the book, all these things that you have to do. I talk about, like, I print my books in China. I have been, and I usually on a print run, I'm 6,000 to 8,000 books now. I didn't always, I started off a little less than that, but that's about where I run a new book. And I talk to the kids about that process. I show them, this is what a printer's copy looks like. I show them how I get a sample back. It shows the white book, that shows the quality of the paper and things.
Yeah.
I show them the printer marks and what the printer marks mean. We talk about I talk about the shipping process, how they load them in boxes, then put them on a pallet, then shrink wrap it. Then the pallet goes into a container. The container goes on a truck. Then it goes onto a ship. Then it goes from customs. It goes all the way from China to Los Angeles. Then they go through customs, take it off the ship, put it on a train, goes from the train to Salt Lake City. Then we take it off the train, and then I go all the way, and then I'm like, and that's how they're right here to give. And some of the kids have their jaw on the floor, and it's just, it makes it real for them.
Yeah.
And I just try to explain that process so they look at the books differently. We talk about how the spine is made, and I talk about what happens if you open a book too far and how it damages. We talk about how children's books are written in different styles. So you have paperback books, you have scratch and sniff, pop-up books, coloring books, books of different sizes and shapes. And I tell them how I choose the size and shape of my books as the, that I want. But if they look around their classroom, we pull out different sizes and shapes and discuss that. But sometimes there's a challenge when you have a bunch of children's books because they don't fit neatly on your shelf. And so I talk about, that's why I do all my books the same size. So if somebody had my collection, they would all fit on the shelf as hardback 8x10s.
I love that. And it's so important. They love to hear those kinds of processes. Kids love information. And once you give them a little bit of information, they completely run with it. So I'm sure that you've inspired more than enough authors in those visits that you've had at those schools. So that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing that process and everything with us. Is there a favorite book that you have out there now that you want to share with us?
I don't have a favorite book, but let me tell you a few little stories. I'm going to tell you a story. I use little things in the book sometimes to illustrate my points, right? I usually, when I go in, I talk about 3 different books with the kids, and all my books have a message. They're written for a different reason. But I'm going to share a story that I use often when I'm with the kids. It has to do with a book that I did called Princess Priscilla, Enough is Enough. Okay. And this book is about a spoiled little girl, Priscilla Joanna Angelica Gore. Had so many things, but she still wanted more. She had 50 dolls at the foot of her bed and 2 pairs of sunglasses up on her head. And I just go and I just start blasting you with lots of stuff, right? But the reason I get into that story is when I talk about my editing team, I talk about how my sister helps me with editing. I do some editing, but I talk about the challenges of editing your own work because you read the mistakes into it, right?
So true.
And then I tell them that the youngest member of my editing team is my son, Tyler. Now, Tyler is now 12, but Tyler was 8 when he was on. And so he was 8 years old when he became a part of my editing team. And this is how. I was ready to go to print with Princess Priscilla. And I think I was ordering 5,000 or 6,000 copies. And Tyler comes in because he had been looking at the printer proof or something like that, or not even the printer proof. We hadn't got to that. He was just been going through it on the computer and reading it. And he goes, "Dad, I think we got a problem." I was like, "What's going on, son?" So he said, "You spelled Priscilla," or no, it wasn't Priscilla. I use her full name. Okay, here's a trick for rhyme that I use sometimes. Her name is Priscilla Joanna Angelica Gore. That's her name. And then she also goes by Princess Priscilla, right? So as I use her name and I refer to her through the story, sometimes I can refer to as Priscilla, sometimes Princess Priscilla, Priscilla Joanna, and or Priscilla Joanna Angelica Gore. I can refer to her different ways, which gives me different rhyme endings in my sentences. And so by mixing that up, just a little trick that can be used sometimes in the writing. But Tyler noticed that her name Joanna was spelled with an H at the first part of the book, and at the end of the book without an H.
Good job, Tyler.
And I only used Joanna in her name twice in the whole book.
Wow.
And they were different spellings. And it had gone through all the adults, all my editors. Nobody had caught it. And my 8-year-old catches this before I go to print. So I changed it and made it consistent, paid him $35, and made him an official editor on my team. And I run and the kids love that story, that Tyler is one of my editors.
It's so fantastic when our kids get involved.
And it's funny because the kids, they pay attention to things, and sometimes they give me ideas. They're like, "Oh, I think you should write a story about this, or you should do this." And they'll tell me about experiences they have with the books, or, I get told, when I go into school, "Oh, you're our favorite author." Maybe they already have a book from when I was in there with the older sibling. It's Utah. Lots of them have older siblings, right? There's a lot of kids. We're not running out of first graders in this state.
That's certainly true. We have a lot of content for them as well. So good for them,
exactly. Right? There's a lot of content. It's a good state to be a children's book author, I guess.
Tell us about the kind of pivot into videos and into animations that you also have included with the books.
Yeah. One of the things that as I go to the schools doing the presentation, sometimes I'm in a classroom. What I did at first is I would put the PDF up on the screen and I would go through and I would read the story. Great. And I would go through and I would tell the story to the kids and the crowd. But one of the things is my presentations are about an hour. And by the time I'm done, I was getting dry mouth. It was just a lot. And I'm trying to entertain the kids, do the computer. There's so many things. And then I thought, well, maybe if I turn one of these into a video. There was a story that my kids like called The Gruffalo. Mm-hmm. And The Gruffalo has a video. And the way that they do their video, it's not full animation. It's kind of a, in-between type animation, right? Yeah. Where they use the pictures from the book, right? And it's narrated. And I said, I could do something like that. So I hired some people and I did it for 3 of my stories a few years back. And then I started using those videos when I would go to the school. So if I'm talking about it and then it's okay, I'm going to share a story with you. And what I would do is I would show 2 videos and then I would do 1 story live. And then I would get a break during the video to catch my breath and think about and watch the kids' reactions and what's going on and kind of gauge my performance based on that. And then when COVID hit last year, I just decided I had been thinking about it. I'm like, I'm going to get them all on video. Mm-hmm. Because then what started happening is I have teachers that would go and use my videos later in the school year and things, and they would refer back to them after I'd been and visited and stuff. And I said, I'm just going to have them all there and up on YouTube so they can go to them, because the one thing about working with children, they don't have money. Mm-hmm. Our audience doesn't have money, right? So,
and you want to get it in front of as many as possible.
Exactly. And what happens is there are kids that they'll get a hold of one of my books. Maybe they got a book because I came to their school, and now they're really excited about me as an author, but their parents aren't going to go out and buy all my books. But that kid will check them out of the library if they're available, mm-hmm. or that they will go and watch the videos if they're available. And it has an impact. And I go back to the author or poet that came to my school years ago. And because of that visit and what an effect that had on me in discovering my talent, I'm here today doing what I do, right?
Yeah.
And I think how many authors or writers in any sense down the road will do that, will have the same effect. We'll come back and say, hey, this author Thal Dixon came and visited us, and they'll be able to find me because of the internet and stuff nowadays. They'll be able to look me up as they're older. Another thing that I noticed is when I got married years ago and started having kids, I went and bought all of Shel Silverstein's books. I bought the Dr. Seuss collection. I bought some Sesame Street books that I had liked. Basically, any book that I liked as a kid, my kids had it in their collection.
Yeah.
So Where the Wild Things Are, of course, and it's why that book still sells, right? Because it was super popular. And then we now buy it for our kids.
Generational.
And now they'll buy it for their kids. I mean, I don't know many parents that didn't buy Cat in the Hat for their kids. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, and so that I think, and I see the same thing. In fact, I joke that all my first graders, because I have some right now where I've been going to the schools now for over 10 years. And I did start off with just first graders. I was going to all elementary and so forth. I have people right now getting married that I was going to their school.
So crazy.
And so now I'm looking at it as, sure, they still have that connection with me. Some of them still reach out. Mm-hmm. And they'll be buying my books, which now I have so many more. They only had my first book, Invasion of the Grumpies. Now I'll have my 11th book out by the end of the year, and they'll have my books for their kids.
Yeah, that's
so
special.
Personal connection. Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what I think. And having, like I said, my kids are at that age where I'm not a grandparent yet, but I'm not far from it.
Right.
I've got 3 kids in their 20s and 2 in their teens. I'm not far off from that point.
Yeah.
And then it will be, and some of my, the same that I have cousins of mine who are already grandparents and so forth, and extended family. And that's already starting to happen where they're getting books for their kids and so forth. And I just see that happening more and more as I get older. Plus, maybe I'll be a cute old man where I can get in there and, with my walker and stuff, and still go and do those visits.
No, that's amazing. And such a special message. I love poetry. I also write in poetry. And I think it's such a gratifying way to express yourself. And I think that mine came a lot through music and memorizing music. And there's a lot of rhyming and, being on cue with notes and such. So you have to really know what you're doing there as well. But yeah, I think that the books that you are sharing with the generations to come and the generations now are just absolutely fantastic. Great messages. And I'll post pictures of them. And of course, all of the links and everything in the description down below. Before we do leave though, please let us know and let our audience know where they can find you and where they can go to get the books and your YouTube so that they can go check them out there too.
My website is grumpypublications.com because my first book was Invasion of the Grumpies. So I named my publishing company.
I love it.
And so I have a website. I do have a YouTube channel. If you go to thaldixon.com, it'll forward on to the YouTube channel. That's the fastest way to find it. Or you can just search for my name. And there's a cartoon version of me that'll pop up, and that'll get you to, and I will continue to create videos for each new book. And I am doing some stories straight to video just because I don't have the printing costs, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some stories that I go, I don't want to absorb a printing cost for this one, but I want to get the story out. So I'm going to put it straight to video and I'll move on to my next story, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to do that. My goal is, before I'm done, is to do 30 books.
That's amazing.
And so I think I've changed that goal to 30 stories. So I don't know if I'll do 30 printed books before I'm done, but we'll see where things go. I'm ramping up my speed at this point. Like I said, I have 3 at the printer right now, and I have 2 in production. Actually, I have 1 completed that's not at the printer yet. And then I have one in production beyond that, and a couple that I'm working in. So it's getting to be that point where it's balancing that business side of it with the writing. And, I don't want it to become more work. I love the enjoyment of going in front of the kids. I love that's why I do it. So I have to be careful that I don't create too much work for myself, that it becomes a job more than a passion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I agree 100%. Like I went into this as a story for my children, and it evolved, and the neighbors love it, and the kids that I read to love it at their schools, and the parents and the grandparents. And so it's wonderful to see the acknowledgement from the community. And especially since you have some awards too, congratulations on that. Utah Best Book Awards. So that is...
No, it's not Utah Best Book Award. Okay.
Tell me again. I'm sorry. I must have, when we were talking about it, misunderstood.
No. I've won Best of State.
It's Best of State.
It's Best of State. And it's not, and the Best of State Awards, just so you know, it's not a book award in the sense of, I've won in children's book for many years in a row now, but it's not like it's not a book contest.
Okay.
Okay. Best of State involves business and involves all kinds of
things. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
There's lots of categories.
Okay.
There's a children's book category. But when you're getting graded for Best of State, your company itself and the product is like worth about 50% of it.
Yeah.
What makes you unique and different is about 30% of it. And what you do to give back to the state of Utah is 20% of it.
Oh.
And that's kind of the formula for the judging.
Got it.
So it's not like, and I win it with Grumpy Publications with a different book every year, but it's a combination. It's the same. It's not like it's the book itself.
Yeah.
They know they're grading the whole company. They're grading the fact I go into the schools. They're grading. So it's not like I sent off my book into a book contest and won it in that regard.
Got you. Gotcha. That makes sense, right?
Maybe I'm not a literary genius or something like that.
I think you can give yourself credit for that.
It's just kind of the whole thing and stuff. And so it's a different type of award. But I believe that the awards are important especially for people that are self-published like myself.
Yeah.
Because there are people that would try to say that it's not as credible. And what it does is, I always make the joke, when you do one book, you're a person who wrote a book.
Right.
You do a second book and maybe you're somebody who wrote 2 books. You start doing 3, 4, 5, and you get awards on them. You start doing things like that. It doesn't matter if you're self-published or you're published traditionally. People are now you're an established author.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
definitely.
Also, did you just publish a book or do you sell books?
Mm-hmm.
How many have you sold? I've sold over 20,000 books.
Yeah.
Over the years now. And as you push them and you start moving a lot of books, those books are in lots of homes and libraries and so forth. That's when, yes, you start to develop that reputation, and then you just continue with that process. Like the shine wears off every penny.
Yeah, like definitely.
Everything's new and exciting. And then eventually it's just, but I do like it keeps me busy. There's always a new project. There's always something exciting, for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes, my family, the cheers aren't as exciting. If I win Best of State, they kind of go, oh yeah, it's Best of State. Great. And if you put a new book out, they're kind of like, oh, you have a new book. And they stop buying them at number 3 or whatever, they're just kind of like, oh, well, my kids are grown now.
Yeah.
So, I hope that some of those people will recycle once they start having the grandkids.
Oh, of course. Definitely.
Now their interest will come back.
Thing I never throw away is books. So
you get them back out. We have them, like my youngest at the house is 12 now, and I still have shelves of children's books. But
seriously,
I look forward to being able to read them again with little ones on my lap.
Oh, agreed. I hope it's far off from me still, but yes, I totally agree. It was such a pleasure to have you on today, and I'm so glad that I reached out and we could make this connection. We wish you the best of luck in all of your future book endeavors and with projects that may come up. And let's keep in touch. If there's ever an event or anything and you'd like to come back on and do a promotion for it, I would love to have you back on.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
This episode's sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word the mouth for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com.
By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah.
This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah.